Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. I'm a law professor, and I just wanna quilt. Hi, we're talking to Vanessa Vargas Wilson. This is part 2 of a 2-part interview, and we're going to talk about Quilting Cruises and also her fan base and monetizing, how she's monetized who she is and what her life is like. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so I'm going to say hi, and I see the sound here, so can you say hi real quick to make sure that it's getting you?
Sure. Hi.
Yep, that's great. Okay, so we had a internet catastrophe, tiny one. So I was asking you, tell me about the Quilting Cruise.
Okay,
oh, look,
so the Quilting Cruise, the way that it typically works is that sewing machine dealers team up, with whatever company of sewing machines that they sell to have the company basically sponsor it. They give them the machines on consignment because usually it's like 75 to 80 people, and then they provide the machines. They get some type of celebrity instructor or whatever. I come up with the projects. I actually put together kits also for my students. And then this was a 7-day cruise to the Caribbean. The way that it works is basically when you're at a port, so like if you're in Jamaica, Cayman Islands, Haiti, whatever, you're not sewing, you're not quilting. But when you're on your way to the next port are the sew days. So you just go into whatever the conference room is and sew. Very cool. You go for a class, we give them the schedule of the class and stuff.
And so who is taking these cruises?
People with money.
People with money.
So the way that it works, because it doesn't really cut into your vacation time, a lot of people took their spouses with them. Because when you're in Jamaica, you're together, you're enjoying the vacation. When you go back, the husbands would be sitting down somewhere reading a book by the pool, and the wife would be sewing.
So do the husbands get along? The other husbands, do they feel like they've got camaraderie because they've got,
I mean, maybe some of them, the ones that are a little bit more social, but, some people are trying to have some downtime, so they would just be like, bye, go do your thing, and I'm going to be over here doing mine. And then they would get together. So at the dinners, they would get dressed up for the fancy cruise dinners, and so we would meet some of the husbands and be like, so you're the one that got us here, huh?
That's great. Now, did you go on your own, or did you bring your family with you?
No. I brought an assistant with me to help me teach the 3 classes. Yeah, my husband didn't. He's not about that life.
It's all work. Yeah,
it's all work cruise, for you. The water. Yeah, exactly. And, people are like, are your kids here? I'm like, do you take your kids to work? No.
But
it's a lot. I mean, you have to extrovert the entire time because some people came from Canada. I mean, so you're like, hey!
That's crazy. And they're coming, this is a cruise really designed around you. It's not that you're, right?
That's it.
It's amazing. Now, how did that happen? How did that occur? How did cruises start?
So they contacted me because they were doing cruises already with Jenny Doan from Missouri Star Quilt Company. And so then they saw me and they're like, hey, you have a big following too. Do you think you can fill this cruise with 80 people? And at the time, I'm people buying $3 patterns and people buying this for $9.99 and $15.99. I'm like, I don't know if I got people that'll drop $1,000 like that, but let's try it.
Yeah.
So I did a little kind of teaser video on my YouTube channel, and it actually sold out faster than any of his other cruises. It sold out in 5 days. Like 80 people dropped the grand in 5 days. I couldn't believe it. He was like, I've never had a cruise sell out that fast. I was like, so I do have the people.
That's great. Now, do you think you'll do it again?
If I'm invited, yeah. It was great money for me. For the dealers, they make their money really on selling the machines. Some people do it a little bit differently where they pay the instructor a flat fee. I'm not doing it for a flat fee. Like instead I do it so that the instructor fee, I get paid per student, and the student basically pays into like an escrow account of the travel agency, and then that's the instructor fee that I get paid. So that has nothing to do with them. Some people will be like, oh, they're going to pay me $30 per student or something for that kind. I'm not going to do it for that. But if I'm the only instructor and I provide the kits and design the projects and everything like I did for that one, yeah, it's totally worth it for me.
Interesting. Really interesting. All right. So, well, I have 2 other questions. One is, if someone's listening to this and they think, I want to be like you, are you going to do like a book or classes on what you do? It seems like that would be a great moneymaker too. You're already doing it.
My husband's big time on that because obviously this has been his idea from the beginning. He thought, well, if you made that kind of money at T-Mobile and you did this in like selling hotel room reservations. He's like, if I can find this girl to do the same type of sales with stuff that she loves and about what she likes to do, like, this would be perfect, you know? So the next step is I've been doing some more talks at different like entrepreneurship conferences, and I've talked before at women's conferences in Texas and Massachusetts, and so I do want to get more into that. And the book, I mean, possibly, you know, that's definitely right along the lines of what we want to.
I like ideas a lot, but it seems like at least I would join something like your quilt club, but for entrepreneurs that really take people through it, because it's so complicated. There are so many. What I was amazed at when I was at I went to Quilt Market this year, and it was really fun and really interesting. And then Quilt Festival, so that in between time was really interesting. Is how many quilt entrepreneurs there are, and how little resources there are out there for them. These crafting and quilting entrepreneurs, and you seem like a perfect person to really capture that market and really have something for them the way YouTube did for you, I guess. I'm amazed that there's just not more out there for them, you know.
There's a newish organization. I think they're already been out for a year, maybe 2 years now. It's called Craft Industry Alliance.
Right.
And
Yes. And do you think they're helpful?
They are for the people starting up. You know, I've done a webinar on there, and it was very well received for people that are just, they're kind of up all over the place. Like, where do I start? What do I do? How do you guys do this? It's kind of really solitary at home. There's so many things that on my way to get to where I am, it was like, it took me 2 years to figure this out. Like, I wish I could have just had someone tell me, you know,
it's ridiculous.
I had nobody to help me.
I know.
And so that kind of a thing, there's a lot of networking that goes back and forth, and people suggesting different types of resources, easier ways to do things. Hey, you can now use this app that will help you do this, and just
hugely, right. And all of that. You were talking about how there wasn't much when you started. We've seen that we have another business, and we've seen that too. And now, like, you know, all this stuff, right? Like Stripe and HubSpot and Zapier and Calendly. Like, it's just amazing, right?
Yeah.
But then it becomes super complicated for people who are just starting out, because there's so much out there now that it's like, where do you start, you know?
And what do you trust? Because, I mean, how many sponsored posts and marketing is like, do you want to make, and it's a guy like in Fiji, like, do you want to live this life? You know, and it's a lot. So it's really like trying to hold on to somebody that you trust and kind of are like, okay, I think I'll, you know, more believable than this. This sounds a little spammy, and it's hard to really filter through all that.
Yeah. All right, I have some other things. So what do you think about the quilting industry as well? When you look at the quilting industry and the crafting industry, sort of what do you see? What does it look like to you right now in terms of, that's a big, broad question.
Yeah. But, to me, based on how I'm doing stuff with my business, like, so we closed down that quilt club, but after that, I launched smaller clubs. So like 5-month-long clubs for handbag making. We did 2 of those. We finished up now in December a wallet making club. So the idea is I pick 5 patterns. I either design them all or buy patterns from designers. Right. And then I teach the video courses. I do live stream videos. We have a private Facebook group. So it's the same idea of the quilt club, just on a smaller, more sustainable scale for me.
Right.
And those have been huge and very, very well received, because for me, I think industry-wise, again, very oversaturated as far as design and content and fabrics, and there's just so much. A lot of the stuff in the teaching, the education aspect, is kind of glossed over, skipped, and they just jump into intermediate, or they just assume that the viewer knows. I feel like with our busy and hectic lifestyles, like, there's more and more people constantly looking for a hobby. But if the first experience or their first impression with the industry is, oh, no way, that looks way too hard, I can't do it, you're already shutting them down. So for me, even though there's, tons of YouTubers that do the same thing that I do, I still feel like I have that part of it nailed down to where it's hand-holding to the point of encouraging and enthusiastic, and you can totally do it. You don't have to be perfect, which is different from a lot of our experiences with the local quilt shops, local quilt guilds. Especially when it comes to like traditional quilting, you have the quilt police, and I had, the quilt guilds that I was in, people would roll their eyes at my quilts because they were too bright and they were too tacky, and this is just quilting. So I think because there's so much content out there, so much information, so many designers and so much people and so many magazines and shops and all that, it's hard for people to find something that they feel like they can hold on to and help guide them through the learning process. but yeah, there's so much content out there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
So much content.
What about your audience? What do you think? Do you have a sense of the demographics that you're hitting?
I do. So it's totally changed over the years. When I first started, it was almost 70% was 45 and older. So when I talk to companies, they're like, well, your demographic is not. And I'm like, actually, you don't even know my demographic, because my target demographic looks nothing like me. You know what I mean? Like, they tend to be like, well, the young crowd is not really into quilting. They don't have a dispensable income. And I'm like, hold that thought.
Right.
I actually have the older ladies watching. And so now it's more broad, like it's spanned out. So more than 50% is still 35 and older, but it's like 17%, 18%, like in all the different categories of age, 18 to 24, 24 to whatever. So for me, what that tells me is that I'm reaching more people, I think, because of my teaching style. So it's not necessarily that quilting is like an older person thing.
No.
It's that the teaching style, when they find my stuff, regardless of where they are on that path and learning, their skill level, is that my stuff is resonating with them, regardless of their age, demographic, background, or whatever.
Interesting. And you're doing so much. I mean, one of the trends we see, there's a really cool shop here in town that's Uptown Needle and Craft Work, is that you do span not just quilting, so that people want to make things for their house and for their kids, and that pulls in a younger demographic. So I find that so interesting that that's the future, right? So if you can have them as loyal branded people that adore your brand, and you've got longevity,
Well, it makes it more manageable. So if you're looking for a hobby, you want to get into this, if you take a quilting 101, I mean, you're going to be like, no. By the time you buy the machine, you buy a kit of $100 and something, and you don't know if you're going to mess it up. You got to get the rotary cutting mat, the rotary cutters, those expensive rulers. It's a lot to do up front.
Yeah.
So with these smaller projects, it's kind of like, well, let me try it. Let me borrow my mom's machine and see if I like this. So on that end, for the entry-level beginner learning, I think my smaller, quickie kind of gift-giving projects are a lot more manageable to build that enthusiasm and interest. But at the same time, if you are a hardcore quilter and you will need to take a break from that quilt that you've been working on for 3 months, you're like, well, let me make a couple of bowl cozies real quick. So you get that still some of that instant gratification quickie projects that you can crank out in the meantime that still uses the same fabrics and stuff leaving your stash already.
It's really interesting. Do you think there's a divide? I'm finding it really interesting. There's a lot of backlash of, well, first of all, I don't quilt. I quilt for my job now, which is funny, right? Because I'm a law professor. But I like that a lot. But this whole the economics of it, socioeconomic aspects of it is fairly interesting too. That there's a kind of I only buy at quilt shops, or I don't ever buy at quilt shops. I'm like not. I buy everywhere, and I don't buy a lot of fabric, but I don't care where I buy it from. I'll buy it from anywhere and use anything. But there is this kind of thing in this community. It's interesting, the community, this sort of hierarchy,
that's definitely a thing.
Or I don't know. It's interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's everywhere. I mean, local guilds to online groups, on the Facebook groups. I mean, when you write the rules for your Facebook groups, you have to write that stuff, because people will post pictures and be like, look at my first quilt. I got the fabric at Walmart. And then the police will
chime in. People will be really mad. Right.
I didn't wait your time. It's going to fall apart after 3 washes. And you know what I mean?
What's that about? Yeah, I know. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I guess every group has that, but it's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to ask you some other questions. We're almost done. So for our, and this is more personal. So our project, what we're doing, this is the vision of the project. First, we have a little bit of IP questions I want to ask you about, because I think that I know the answers, but I'm really curious. But also sort of the road of our project. I'd like to ask you your thoughts about it, and love to have you come back as sort of one of our. We have a quilting arm, but we have some sort of advisor people that are helping us sort of strategize on what to do. But with intellectual property, you've talked about the patterns, and I think what you're doing is incredible. I think you are incredible. I'm so impressed, and you're amazing. You're beyond amazing, and you're like, you're amazing. I mean, you really are amazing. I'm so impressed with you and sort of everything you're doing, and you're so creative, and it's just incredible. So Now I lost my train of thought.